Hello everyone, I'm Stephen with Trace Digital Forensics, and in this video we're going to talk about hashing and evidence verification. Now hashing is the application of a computer program to generate basically a digital fingerprint of a file or a message, an email, and it's used in online security. You browse to websites and you see the little lock in the address bar that tells you the SSL is enabled, and as a part of that, they use hashing, and they use hashing with digital certificates to identify them. And so we also use hashing in forensics, and we can hash a file to identify it, to compare it to other files. But one of the ways that we often use it is to verify that evidence hasn't changed. So when I make a copy of a hard drive, I will hash the copy and get a fingerprint of it so that later on I can hash it again, and I can say, you know what, it hasn't changed. I can make two copies and I can hash them both, and I can verify that they are exactly the same. And there's two common algorithms or formulas that we use for hashing. One's called SHA-1 and the other is called MD5. And SHA-1 is the more current of the two. It's had some minor security problems, and it's no longer recommended for use in online security. But it's much stronger than MD5. And really there's successors to SHA-1 that we should be using instead. Most forensic programs do not support them. I feel comfortable saying SHA-1 is good enough right now. We should be moving on, but we're not in a terrible position with it. MD5 is a different case. So there's two use cases that a hash algorithm tries to defend against. One is I have a file, and it's known, I've already hashed it, and I want to make sure that no one else can come up with a different file that has the same hash. And that use case is roughly, it's conceptually equivalent to me walking into a room and asking people, hey, what's your birthday? And looking for another person that has my birthday, right? And on average, I'm going to have to ask 200 people, or a little less than that, before I find someone that has my birthday. But the other case is where we want to prevent someone from creating any two files that have the same hash, any two files that are different that have the same hash. And that's equivalent to me walking in a room and asking people, hey, what's your birthday? And I'm looking for any match. They don't have to match me, they can match each other. So if person number 15 matches person number 18, I've got my collision, it's called. And so we want to prevent any collisions. And with MD5, the digital fingerprint that it gives out is 128 bits. And so for the harder use case, if I already have a known file, on average, you're going to have to pick 2 to the 128th different files before you can find one that matches. And that's really hard to do. It's impossible to do. There's not enough computing resources in the world. And the powers just means 2 times 2, actually 127 times. But if you don't care which one matches, if you're just looking for any two that match, instead you only need to do 2 times 2 about 64 times. That's how many messages you need to come up with before you get a collision. Now in forensics, in most cases, it's the harder use case that applies. Here's my problem, and this is why I have really, I don't like that people still use MD5. I think it's a bad practice. It was designed in 1991. And in 1996, cryptographers found some theoretical flaws. And what that means is they found some structural weaknesses. They didn't have a practical attack to make use of it. But mathematically or logically, they didn't like the look of it anymore. And so since 1996, cryptographers, these are the guys and gals that make and break codes every day. That's what they do. They're computer scientists and mathematicians, and they break codes and they make codes. And they've been recommending for over 20 years that we do not use MD5. And we've still got people out there using MD5. And we've got products out there that use MD5. And so in most forensic cases, we're only worried about the harder use case. And so MD5 should hold up today. But I told you the theoretical weaknesses were found in 1996. The first full practical attack on MD5 was in 2004. That's 13 years ago. In 2012, 5 years ago, there was a malware malicious program called Flame that forged digital certificates using MD5. in real time, which means for 5 years, MD5, for security purposes, has been completely and utterly broken. And for the harder use case, they do have some theoretical, they have at least one theoretical attack. It's still impractical because of the amount of computing resources it requires. But computers will get faster and the attacks will get better. You know, and there's always a possibility that we've already found the best attack against it. But that's unlikely considering they keep coming out with better and better attacks and have shown no sign that they've run out of mathematics to use. So hashing is considered a best practice. And it really bothers me that we've got professionals out there, people who call themselves experts, who continue to use something that the experts in cryptography have said for 20 years not to use. And they'll go into court and they'll call it a best practice. And if you ask them, you know, well, could two files have the same hash? They'll say, well, the odds are infinitesimally small. And they'll give you one of the two numbers. They'll give you 2 to the 128th, which is the odds of any two random files having the same hash. Or they'll give you the more realistic value, which is 2 to the 64th. Whatever that number is, 2 times 2 is 64 times. It's a big number. It's something like the odds of winning the lottery and being bit by a shark while you're struck by lightning all on the same day. And it's a really misleading answer. So if you're asking someone that, well, hey, is this a best practice? And they say, yeah, it's a best practice. And they say, well, what are the odds that two files could have the same hash? And say, oh, it's 1 in some huge number. Billions of billions of billions of billions. They're lying or they're misleading you. And that's a problem. And it doesn't mean the evidence is bad, because MD5 is really good at detecting accidental tampering, or not tampering, accidental modifications. If they've accidentally modified the file, their hard drive got corrupted and changed something, MD5 is going to detect that. It's fine. So, I mean, if you've got no reason to believe the evidence has been tampered with, it's fine. But they use it to give this veneer of reliability that wasn't earned. Because again, the experts in cryptography, the experts in hash functions have told us for over 20 years, stop using MD5. And we keep using MD5. And people go into court and they'll or deposition and they'll testify about it and they'll get asked and they'll give this number because it's in some of the books or the training manuals. It's very, very misleading. And I think they give it because they don't understand the difference. I don't think it's an active attempt to mislead for most of them. They don't understand the difference. But they absolutely should be challenged on it. So if you get someone who tells you that it's just impossible for two hashes to be the same, or it's just these infinitesimal odds, well, you know what? I'm going to link some articles in the description for this video that will give you some real-world examples of where that happened. And you can produce pictures that have the same hash that are totally different. You can produce an article that talks about the flame malware that forged digital certificates using MD5. And then you can ask them again if MD5 should still be a best practice. And if we should still depend on MD5 to give that veneer of reliability, respectability, of authenticity. Because while I think that technically speaking, MD5 still accomplishes its task, it has suffered worse and worse flaws. Worse and worse flaws have been discovered. Better and better attacks have been discovered over the last 20 some odd years. And for the harder use case, it's still not practical to break it, but I expect that at some point in the future, it will be. And that's because I trust cryptographers to keep inventing better mathematics. And forensic people are not cryptographers. We're not experts in cryptography. We're experts in forensics. And, you know, we don't read all the cryptography journals, and we're not necessarily going to know when that final break makes it no longer okay to use. And so there's no reason to keep using something that you know has flaws and just hoping that it's going to keep standing up in the use case that you need it for when there's better alternatives. You know, we're depending on bad science and the hope that it'll keep being good enough for our uses instead of using good science or good mathematics. And so I hate MD5. You know, it's an interesting formula. I loved reading the breaks, and I've been interested in cryptography for a long time, and I was reading about them, you know, 15 years ago, and it's really been interesting to see the progression. But no way do I recommend using MD5. And if you've got people that are using it, I think you should challenge them on it. And if they can explain why it's still good enough and they're keeping up on the cryptography enough to do that, then all right, more power to them. You know, if they can answer the questions and they can explain why it's good enough in these circumstances, then I would let it go. But if you ask them about it and they give you these numbers, I think you show them why it's misleading and call them out on it. Good luck, guys.